Hey, everybody, it's Natalie B. McKenzie with The Whole Woman, and welcome to this week's episode of Living Life Authentically with yours truly. Well, by now, you've figured it out that I'm uber excited. You can see the sleeves are off, and I am ready for summer. I don't know about you, but my weekend was chock full with so much to do, and I thought I was going to have a quiet summer. Well, let me just tell you a little bit about what we did, my husband and I, this weekend. We attended the wedding of kids who were friends of the children of friends of my husband's, like over 30 some years. So friends before the kids were born, they call him Uncle Obi, the whole 9 yards, and they got married. But this wedding was so beautiful because the love was pure. The family unity was amazing to see two families really join and come together. The setting was great. And boy, we danced till yeah, it was a great weekend. Well, I hope you're having lots of summer fun and that you have lots to do with friends and family because it's going to look a little bit like that for me this summer. Just family time, chilling out close to home. And we hope the same for you. As you're getting ready for summer, remember to pack in just a little extra laughter, some extra love, and lots of kindness to go around. Welcome to this week's episode. We have, speaking of kindness, one of those people you meet who beautiful outside, radiant, sunny personality, but then you know this person just got some juice in their workspace, but they're so understated and cool and easy that you can't wait to sit and chat with her. Well, that's today's guest, ladies and gentlemen. She is an empathetic executive, and it comes across in her communication, which makes me think she is truly walking in her purpose. She is committed to workforce diversity, and she's focused on establishing partnerships and engagement between the human capital priorities, meaning the people, and the corporations. I like that about her. She is the head of talent for Aegis Ventures, a VC studio joint venture with Northwell Hospital Holdings. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, help me welcome today's beautiful guest, Cheri Larkins.
Hi, Natalie. Thank you so much
Hello.
for having me.
What an absolute pleasure. And then you show up with the beautiful red lipstick. Like, seriously?
It's a little gloomy outside, so I'm trying to bring a little sunshine in.
There you go. Well, you sure did. Beautiful, sunny personality, as I mentioned in our intro. That's what sticks out most for me when we first met. And it carries over because even the resume, when I look at your resume, I can see that you are making a difference. You've got impact in your space, yet it's this little thingy. It's like, okay, I already like her. She is standing on what she does. She is standing on who she is, and there's no need for you to embellish it. Well, what went into the making of such a beautiful person, Cheri? Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you were born, where you grew up, and the family dynamics.
Sure. Well, I feel like that's part of the journey, right? How when you're earlier in your career, you feel like you've got to show that you deserve to be someplace. And then as you get older, you're like, I'm here. And you really want to connect with people in a more authentic way outside of all the pomp and circumstance.
Yep.
So I am a New Jersey native. I grew up, born and raised in Long Branch, New Jersey. In the same town my mom grew up. My mom, my sister, and I had teachers in common. We all went to the local high school and elementary schools and everything. And
Wait a
so,
minute. Did you say your mom and your sister, along with you, have
yeah,
teachers in common?
we did.
Oh,
It's a small town. And, we didn't have very much growing up. I was clear on that. And it's a kind of town where, people know each other and you really get to know folks. And so that's how I grew up. It was my mom, it was just the three of us, so my dad was not really part of our world. And so growing up, I was one of those, I was always studious, I was a little awkward. I could say it now as a grown up, I was a little awkward, but always studious. And so, my mom would have to tell me to go to bed. I'd be at the kitchen table falling asleep trying to do my homework. I was always trying to reach for something. And I think watching my mom work so hard, to kind of make a space for us really left an impression on me. So, I knew young, I found out that she had dropped out of community college to have me and my sister, and that left an imprint on me, right? So I always sort of had this thing where I wanted it to be worth it, right? If she was going to give up so much for us, I wanted it to be worth it. And so that was something I can remember, really, really young.
Tell me a little bit about the dynamics with you and your sister. Who is older?
Yeah, so I am the eldest, and we're 5 years
Five.
apart, right? So that makes you, especially when things are a little hard, that makes you kind of more parent than sister, in that dynamic. So my sister and I, have those 5 years. I love her to death. She is the one who really is very family oriented. She has 5 lovely children. I have 4 nephews and a niece. But we always saw things differently, right? She was very focused on family and really wanting that for herself, and I was always focused on like, this is going to be better. We're going to do better. There's going to be more for us, and so we always saw the world kind of differently that way.
That's beautiful because that older child syndrome kind of makes you want to set an example and set a standard. I get it, and then you get to be a little more protective of her, and I'm sure she's probably a little more fun loving. Tell us about the studious Cheri that then grew up and got to high school. What were your career interests? Were you involved in sports at all, or were you theatrical? Tell us a little bit.
Yeah. So one of the things I found out early on was to get into college and to do some stuff. And so if there's anything you know about me, I'm going to do it all. So I was in like 100 clubs. I was in the science club and the math club and the drama club. I played the flute. I wanted to be a cheerleader more than I wanted to breathe. And so I did everything I could to make that a reality. We didn't have the money really for me to kind of do that independently. So I got a job so that I could afford the pom-poms and the bloomers and all of that. I just wanted it so bad, but I was always on the go, always, out trying to kind of do much. As a grown-up, you can kind of say, okay, you were just always trying to prove, but as a kid, I just thought I was busy and had a lot of interests.
I like the fact that you said you got a job to buy the pom-poms and the bloomers. I mean, it's like you were very clear. And so, wow. So an underachiever you were, huh? So, so tell us about that college choice. Now, your mom dropped out of community college, you mentioned. I heard you say that. It stuck in my head.
Yeah.
Where were you getting this guidance and this drive from? Who was putting those nuggets in your head?
I was lucky to have a really good friend who was brilliant, so smart. She was, valedictorian of the neighboring high school. And I knew I had to go to college, right? That much I knew. I knew that was the path. I didn't know what that meant, though. I didn't know where to apply. I applied to 3 schools, didn't know any better. And she picked the schools out for me. So she applied early decision to Bryn Mawr. So she was done, in October. They accepted her, of course. And so she just turned that time to helping me figure it out. And so she picked out Barnard at Columbia, that she thought I'd be happy at. And I was just excited to be applying somewhere. And so the 2 schools that I had the choice between is I had gotten an engineering scholarship at the University of Rochester through Xerox. And then this opportunity to go to Barnard at Columbia. And I didn't even know how to make that choice, but I Googled both of them and I saw a picture of Rochester and the snow. And I saw a picture of someone digging down to get into their car. And I was like, no, ma'am, that will not be it. And so I ended up in New York.
Please tell me you had a scholarship to Barnard as well.
I did, very fortunately. The institution is very good at making way, right? And so I did have a very generous need-based scholarship that afforded me the opportunity to do school, but all the other stuff, my family didn't have the opportunity to give that, right? So I was working and working for, I'm going to date myself, but like to pay the phone bill,
You mean the wired phone?
A wired phone that you'd pay for by the minute,
That's
And
right.
so I had several jobs and you're just trying to balance it. So it was tough for me being in a college like Columbia. Those kids know where they're going. They know what they're doing. They've been raised for this, right? And so I had the smarts, but I didn't have any of the advantage, right? That would enable this to be easy. So it was rough. I constantly questioned whether I was going to make it through.
Wow. So let's talk about the choices and I hear engineering going,
Yeah.
and I know you had a bit of a switch, but let's talk about the choices rather you made academically and how that went into the preparation for where you are today.
Yeah. So I had the fortune in middle school and high school to be selected for engineering programs. These programs that the lead and programs like this that are meant to create access for kids just like me really had an impact on me. So I was exposed to engineering. I was exposed to calculus. I was exposed to all of these things that helped me kind of get a leg up. So I got to Columbia almost maxed out at calculus, right? Like I had that foundation that helped me then be able to kind of navigate a little bit. So I did change my major from chemical engineering to architecture. My heart and spirit just were not in the space, but I found architecture to be really lovely and beautiful. It had such an art history component in addition to the technical pieces. And so it was a really more authentic balance, right, of form and function and beauty. And so that's sort of, I left with a degree in architecture. But what I didn't know is that then you were supposed to be an architect. Again, all of these first graduate things, I just thought it
Yes.
was, like a elective, if you will.
That's interesting. I like the way you put it. I didn't know I was supposed to be an architect.
I did not know that that was it. And so I got out of college and my first job was in transition consulting. So I was in this space with very senior executives for a variety of reasons, were in transition. They were used to being in an office all the time, and I was there, and they just poured into me their experience, their wisdom. They were in these reflective moments, and I got to just soak that up like a sponge. So you don't always get what you want, but you get what you need. That might be the most impactful professional thing that's happened to me, being in that space in that moment when I was so impressionable and could just soak up. And I can attribute so much of my understanding of business strategy to sitting with these CTOs and CFOs and CEOs as they were reflecting on their careers. And so I made a commitment to my mentor then that I would go to business school. I didn't know what that meant, but he made me promise.
I love it. You're so obedient. I love it.
I am very dutiful. If you did take those personality assessments, I am very dutiful. I'm slightly dutiful and then a little bit of a rebel, but he made me promise and I honor my promises. And so I did go to business school, and that rounded out the education, right? That was like, okay, I can do this. This actually is really interesting to me. I studied international business and strategy. And that's when the pieces started to kind of click, right? Where I was like, okay, I think I can be in this world. I think I can do it. The technical acumen that was in that architecture, engineering translates into the financing. But then it's a whole new thing, right? Then you start striving to be in this corporate space that there aren't that many of us, right? I was relatively young because, again, very, very driven and wanting to kind of be the first. I remember getting really fixated on things like I want to be on a 40 under 40 list. Like I just had these things that I wanted to accomplish quickly. And so I get into these corporate spaces and I was just constantly hungry for the next. In some ways that was great. But I think from a personal perspective, coming from where I'd come from, I was always hiding, right? I never quite fit. That imposter syndrome was so real for me in those early years where I was constantly trying to be something different, prove I was something different, prove I was kind of worthy to be in the room, wanting to be liked, wanting to be accepted. And so I think that sometimes I would like outperform to try to prove I deserved a seat at the table, when really all that wasn't necessary. But I didn't know any other way. I had been doing that for so long.
I'm curious, Cheri. So as you're pushing along, moving along, and advancing, where is your personal development? I hear the professional development,
Yeah.
but then you mentioned the imposter syndrome and feeling maybe unfulfilled is my word, not putting words in your mouth, but knowing that you were hiding something. But were you taking the time to nurture and develop your personal relationships at the same time? And were you dating? Were you getting out? What was going on?
Yeah. So yes, and not yet. Right. So I think around that time, I did start to create some of the friendships that now are my, circle and my tribe. I didn't know it then. Right. We still were young and, it was very hi, I'm this, I'm very important. Right. You're still kind of
My business part.
Yes. You're still very business card in those early years. And I didn't know I was going to get married. I was like, being secure because of how I had grown up was the most important thing. I didn't know if I was going to have a family. I was okay sacrificing that. I had a list of things I wanted to do. I wanted to buy a house for my mom. I didn't want to have any credit card debt. I had like a whole list of 20 things that I wanted to do. And if I could do that, maybe a family. But I will tell you honestly, my first marriage was to my career, and that's what I focused on. And so I dated, and, we traveled, and I had friends and things like that. But I didn't start doing the work, right, of like chipping through all of these things until later, kind of in my personal and professional career.
Very interesting. So, on your list of things to do, getting married was not priority. Family was not priority. You were focused on your personal financial security, which makes sense.
Yes.
So let's talk about the progression professionally and how your professional growth balanced or made room for your personal growth, or which came first.
Yeah. So I got to the place where I kept growing, right? But there's going to be parts, and I had a boss where, it didn't all click till later, but I did have a boss who was like, there's a couple of things, some rough edges, right? Because whether you want it or not, as much as you're hiding, your scars, they leak through. Right. And they leak through in a way that's constructive when you've done the work, but they leak in through in a way that's not constructive when you haven't done the work. And in those early years, I hadn't done the work. So my defensiveness would come through, right? And my fight or flight would come in, right? And so it would ruffle feathers of colleagues because I was so driven, right? I was willing to kind of charge through anything to get where I wanted to go. And that wasn't great, right? And so I did have a boss that was like, we should figure this out. Let's get you a coach. I think you've got so much potential, but you will not be able to get where you want if we don't kind of chip away at this. And she had gotten to know me a little bit. And I think that a couple of things happened that enabled me to open up to that. So one, I did meet my husband, who is amazing. And didn't have the baggage I had, right? Grew up relatively affluent. His father's a lawyer. And so just didn't have the baggage, had a much different view on things. And the way he loved me felt more authentic than I was allowing myself to love myself.
Oh, wow.
And so there was something about the protectiveness he offered me and the way that he would pour into me and the beauty that I saw reflected in his version of me that really just created a little bit of light, right? Like I could chip away a little bit at some of this baggage. I did have a coach who was very lovely, who gave me that seeping, piece and really helped me understand that if you don't do the work and think about how these things manifest, if you don't let people in and let them know, they're going to see the scars. It's going to manifest. That fight or flight is going to kick in and they're going to see that, but they're going to interpret it as something it's not. They're not going to see the journey, right? Unless you tell them the journey. And so figuring out how to let people in these places where I didn't feel comfortable, right? At this point, had gotten a very high profile job. I had a team of 175 people reporting to me. So it didn't naturally feel safe, right? To kind of open up these wounds.
Yes.
But I just started doing the work. I think having my son was also another thing.
Wait a minute. So when did you get married to this man who I get it, because I tell people my husband loves me in a way that is just, it seems magical.
Yes.
Because at my worst person, at my worst moment, he reminds me how kind and loving I am, which forces me to not be mean. So I get it. When did you get married, and how old is your son that you've mentioned?
So we will celebrate 8 years married in September. And my son is 4, he'll be 5 in October. Oh, that is us.
I love it. I somehow I get the feeling this is your world and your happy space.
This is my world and my happiness. And so having a son puts it all in perspective. Do I want him to carry the same baggage I was carrying, right? What did I do all of this for? If what I bring home and what I demonstrate to him just replicates the cycle. He doesn't have to have that baggage. I did all of this work so that we could have a different space, but I had to do now the work in myself so that what I'm showing him is love. Who he can be is then love and grounded and confident. And so that all happened. I think also COVID really impacted me a lot, right? And so COVID, and I think also the Black Lives Matter moment, where I had kind of gotten to this inflection point where it was like, what else do you want? What else do you feel like you need professionally? And the answer was not really anything. I had done so much, and I could tap out now and have lived lives that other people haven't had the opportunity to. So now what's it worth? Right? And what's it mean? And what's going to be the impact? And I felt because of where I was, and I worked for a very wonderful company, but in that moment where so many leaders are being authentic about their journeys and the inequities and how we as especially Black women have had to exist and the scars we get in corporate spaces, I felt muted. I didn't feel free to talk about those things in the space I was in. And so I made the decision that I was going to find a way where I may not always be right, but I wasn't going to be quiet anymore. I was going to find a place that was going to let me be on my authentic self. I was going to find a place where I could just be myself and be more vulnerable and feel comfortable about the things that I am, that I think are good and bad, but really me, and work through those things. And so that really had an impact on me, as I know it had an impact on a lot of people.
Cheri, you said something about the pandemic and what an integral part um, the time during the pandemic, being home, being quarantined, how that impacted you. What were some of the steps that you found yourself taking other than the career shift, but in your personal space? And how did that show up, manifest in your career?
I got a good coach. I got a good therapist. I found a way to find my sister circle who really loved me and took me as I went and poured into me. And so I really, in that moment, simultaneously got connected to circles of women who had been in different places, and again saw a version of me that I wanted to aspire to. And I think being quarantined with my young son, right, where I had been on the road 2 to 3 weeks a month before that, I didn't want to miss any more time, and everything I did he picked up on, right? And so just all of that really added up to me wanting something intentionally different, just more aligned with who I was and who I wanted to be, and to shed these things that I felt like I had to do to be successful in the spaces I was in. So something had to give, right? That was what was required in those spaces, and I no longer wanted to do that.
How are you able to show up in your workspace authentically, productively, impacting those who are your direct reports or those who you're responsible for supporting and creating a safe space for? Because in your role, I believe that those are some of the things that you're looking to do.
Yeah.
How are you able to do that?
So I intentionally found a different space. That was the first piece, right? Sometimes you cannot be who you want without moving, right? And I had to leave what I had been building for so long, right? And intentionally let that go. And so there was a mourning there, right? That I wanted to be this corporate executive, and I had to let that go. And when I let that go, I had to reflect on what I wanted to be in the space. And so I now work for an organization that is smaller, that I do get to know people better. I get to open up to them better. When there are these moments where the fight or flight kicks in, I've committed to myself to come back to them and be like, hey, that was some scar tissue. I'd like to tell you about it. I'd like to tell you about what happened to me that made me react that way. And I want to believe good intent in our relationship and invest in this. So let's go have dinner and let's talk about this. So I've had to share so much more in being here in a year than I had in a decade working with other colleagues. And I love it. I love that I don't feel like I'm hiding. And I found other people who are like me. I find that the colleagues that I have found are inspired and flawed and motivated in ways that are really synergistic to how I'm wired. And so that's a big help too, right? I don't have to hide from them. They're quirky like I'm quirky, right?
Some human beings, huh?
And you
Aren't we all flawed?
you find people who have journeyed, not your journey, but a journey, right? And love themselves. And I love that about them.
Let's talk a little bit about your tribe, because
Yeah.
I'm sure this tribe is beyond those you interface with, interact with, and share career space with. Let's talk about some of the women or some of the people that you have found commonality with, where
Yeah.
there's space and grace for you to just be as they are being themselves.
Yes. So I'm a member of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated. And
Good.
so being in that space and learning from more established members was really impactful for helping me learn diplomacy and learn partnership and learn a commitment in a broader way, right? To having relationships that are going to transcend kind of a single moment. When I joined the Links Incorporated, I feel like that was a real change for me. The women that I got to fellowship with and learn from, that's where I said it inspired me to be a version of myself that I saw reflected in their eyes. They are game changers. They are world leaders and just amazing. And they are moms and they are people. And, they can give you sound advice on the paths that they've gone through professionally. They can, pull you aside when your wig's a little crooked personally. They can, pour a glass of champagne and celebrate authentically when you win and want that for you. They inspire me to be a better friend and mom and everything that I want to be. And then being in Jack and Jill Incorporated with regards to that pivot from not thinking I was going to have a family to really wanting to be a great mom. I have loved surrounding myself with these amazing moms who are so committed and wonderful and help me be the best one that I can be for Carter, and give me space to talk through the challenges, that are inherent to being a mom, from their development to supporting them and having to advocate, for especially raising a Black man. It's a thing. It's heavy, and so having this tribe that is there for me has been part of my healing, and I can't say it enough. And a good therapist and a good coach. I think that we just need to create space and say it's okay. I started meditating every day. That has been life changing, right? There's just something about creating space for our own investment, our own health, our own just unwind and recharge has just been life changing. I didn't think I deserved the space when I was striving. And now I know I need the space to keep striving.
You said that you didn't think you deserved the space when you were striving, but having given yourself the space, I think it's fair to say you're now thriving.
I feel that way. I feel, being in the startup space is so unique, and it is a different kind of work, and it is a lot of work, right? But I wouldn't have it any other way. And I feel rewarded, and I feel valued, and I feel authentic, and so I'm able to have an impact far beyond what I was able to in even larger organizations. And I feel like I'm doing it in a way that's true to who I am. And I get to go home and look my son in the eye and hug my husband and feel good about who I was during that day. And so it really does feel like I'm still working, but I'm not hustling anymore. I'm trying to be that person that all of these folks that have poured into me saw.
That is beautiful. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been speaking with Cheri Larkins, and I think it is safe to say that though she shows up daily to be head of talent for Aegis Ventures, she is a wife, a mom. She is a sister friend. She's fully engaged in her community. She's my D9 sister, so, there's some love right there. And she shows up, I can say this from our personal meeting, she shows up with a warm smile and a warm spirit. And the irony is, we met so briefly and haven't spent a lot of time together, but the warmth was enveloping and it was so genuine that I feel like we've spent more time than we actually did. I'm going to say to you, you are truly living the life of the whole woman, which is one who realizes she is who she is. She is flawed and she is evolving, and she gets to thrive while she's striving, and you give back. I wish you absolutely great joy. You deserve it. Congratulations. Thank you for sharing with us. And we look forward to getting to know you better. Thank you so much, Cheri Larkins. Ladies and gentlemen, Cheri Larkins, she's head of talent for Aegis Ventures. And as she indicated earlier, she's involved with several community activities. How can we stay in touch with you, Cheri?
Sure. I'm on all social medias, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Cheri Larkins. You can look me up. Aegis, you can look us up on our company as well, and look into the great things we're doing in the AI healthcare space. So really excited to get the time. The sentiment is mutual. You have been warm and amazing from the moment we met. So thanks for having me on your show and giving me a moment to share a little bit about myself.
Well, we look forward to hearing more from you, staying connected with you, and we wish you great joy and a happy summer.
Thank
Ladies and
you.
gentlemen, we have to take it to a close right now. Maybe we'll have Cheri back later with us so we can chat some more. But in the meantime, we want to remind you that you can always get some Lady Mists right here by checking us out on TWW, and you can shop bit.ly/TWW Lady Mist. Feel free to scan the screen and you can get yourself some great Lady Mist, awesome fragrance, hand sanitizer, and body butter that has shea butter, which will help to protect that beautiful skin as you tan and glow through the summer. I'm Natalie B. McKenzie, and you've been watching Living Life Authentically with yours truly. I wish you enough life to live, enough joy to give, enough love to share. I wish you enough. Good night.